Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve Management Plan submissions. My name is Jane Robertson. I am starting the hearing today because although we have an elected panel, they have not determined yet who is going to chair the hearing. So I would now invite them to determine who will chair.
I'd like to nominate Matt Wong.
I'll second it.
Okay, so I will pass the hearing over to Nat and leave you for him to chair.
Thank you very much. So welcome everybody. Thank you for your time. It's always good to get submitters along to speak to panels at the hearing. We're here for the Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve Management Plan hearing today, and we've got a few speakers, not too many, but so the way today's going to work is the speakers have got about 10 minutes to speak. So if you go over that, we'll probably keep control of that time, but if you finish early, we might have time for Q&A as well. So just bear in mind, we may have some questions from our panel. The panel today, we've got Councillor Barry Bruce here to my right, and then Esther Whitehead as well down the end here, and myself, Matt Wong. We're supported today by a few QLDC staff. We've got Jane here to my left, Sophie, Jenny and Ruby on tech today. Hopefully that works. We have got one submitter online by looks of things, John Evans, so we'll be cracking into it shortly. Just some housekeeping. Exit right there, bathrooms I'm told are through to the next building, and then assembly point is out by the car park there. So in an emergency, now you know what to do. We are going to be moving into deliberations after the hearing once everyone's spoken, so that probably be this afternoon or after this one's been through the hearings, and I believe we are scheduled to finish somewhere around 11 o'clock. Yes, 10:55 is our last speaker. So let's kick into a little bit of the housekeeping for ourselves as a panel. So just bear with us while we go through some of these mundane processes for you. So let's start with apologies. Do we have any apologies? No, we're all here. That's great. Declarations of conflict of interest. Does anyone have a interest to declare? I actually have one already. So I am a council appointed trustee on Otago Southland, and they are a submitter, but it has been excluded from this draft pack. So I'll talk to that very shortly. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Okay. So we've got the agenda in front of us, and we'll need a confirmation of the agenda without additional alteration. Can I have a mover and a seconder? So Barry moved. Yes, that is seconded. So I will just add at this point, Otago Southland did submit, but it's not in the papers today, but it has been distributed. So all of the panel have read their submissions now. Right, we have Jenny. She is our reporting officer for today. I thought we'd pick off with you, maybe giving us a bit of a summary of the papers in front of us.
Thank you, Matt, and hello to everybody. I've met you all before. Yeah, 10 years really since we last met out at the Glenorchy Hall. What has happened since then? So yeah, I think it's a very beautiful grass airstrip out there today. It has got quite a complicated history, and yeah, thank you all for your submissions, and look forward to having an updated version of the plan. A lot of work has been undertaken by the community with submissions over the last few years. We've done a couple of sessions out to the community, asking some questions and for their feedback, and yeah, definitely acknowledge that by community I mean the aviation community and the Glenorchy community. We had a really good response rate to our early engagement on this plan, and that helped inform the draft, and yeah, a good number of submissions that were around particular issues primarily. So yeah, thank you, and happy to answer any questions as the course of the day goes on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jenny. So without further ado, we can kick into the hearings. Looks like James is ready to go. He's got his reading prepared by the looks. So just a reminder, you got 10 minutes. If you finish early, there might be some time for Q&A.
Yep.
Lovely. Take it away, James.
Thanks, guys. I'm James Stokes. I'm the managing director of Glenorchy Air and one of the commercial operators that uses the strip semi-regularly. We started off our spiritual home as the Glenorchy Airstrip back in 1992. Since then, I've moved our operations down to Queenstown, but still regularly use the strip, and we'd like to potentially come back here and use it a lot more in the future. I do see some encouraging things within the management plan in front of us, one of which is some development of toilet facilities and potentially hangars, although I'd be asking why it's necessarily going to be limited to just two if the business is there or the market is there in the future. I think my main concern is around sort of limiting the landing. So we currently have a Environment Court decision from 2019 that, well, the landings can't be more than they were in 2019. I don't have a problem with that. But I don't see how we're going to get anywhere near that if we're not going to have a skydiving operator and a microlight operator on the strip in the future. So why are we putting limits in on the other commercial users if we're probably not even going to be getting to 50% of what those landings are going to be, or of what those landings were, sorry, back in 2019. It would be much easier, much less over regulatory and much simpler for everyone. I would think a lot less admin for the council and us if we monitored the landing numbers, and if they get towards those 2019 numbers, and I genuinely don't believe there's a chance of that happening in the near future or even the foreseeable future, then we can look at how we're limiting things based on use. Why are we overcomplicating, basically putting out a solution to a problem that currently doesn't exist and probably won't? That's probably my main point. We have invested quite heavily in technology in the last 5 years, or right through the pandemic, into turboprop aircraft. We're operating the Daher Kodiaks, which are larger, quieter aircraft than some of the piston aircraft that they've been operating. They can also operate off the airstrip here with full loads, so we're not sort of bringing in a half-loaded aircraft, which we would have to do in the past in order to use the strip, because of not necessarily its length, but its condition. The airstrip is quite undulating by its nature, so it would be good to see in here, you know, we're saying maintain the airstrip, but could we have a plan to maybe in 2 stages flatten the airstrip out so that maybe some larger aircraft like the caravans could use it without restrictions, so they're quieter again. I think that stuff is a bit more important than trying to limit commercial landings when we're not going to be running into a problem. That's probably all I've really got to say on the plan. I'd say there are some encouraging things in there, but the limitations on landings I really think is a solution to that problem.
That was very quick, James.
Yeah.
That was 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, that's plenty of time for questions and answers. On the panel, I'll put that to you first. Have you got any questions for James?
Just go back to levelling the strip.
Yeah.
You're saying that will enable more modern fuel efficient aircraft.
Yeah. Right now we have to operate a quite a specialized airplane, and we're here to be able to do it at a commercially viable load. Yeah. Which that's Glenorchy isn't the only reason we have that airplane. We have some other routes and things we use it, but it has enabled us to operate more efficiently out of here. But when we're operating like the GA8 airvan, we have to operate it, depending on the weight of the passengers, 5 to 6 instead of 7. Caravan is 6 passengers, and that's a 14-seater airplane. And it's not the length of the strip, it's because it's going like that. And the Caravan's a reasonably large airplane, very quiet airplane, but it because it's quite heavy, it needs to accelerate, and if it's going uphill and then downhill, it's sort of can't get the speed when it's heavy to get off there. So we are quite limited, load limited there. We are quietest aircraft actually we've invested the most in. It's the most efficient carbon wise per passenger and fuel burn per passenger. We can't actually operate here because of the condition of the airstrip.
How many does that carry? How many?
13 passengers. So instead we're bringing a
that
7
inclusive?
passenger.
Sorry,
Yeah.
13 passengers plus the pilot.
Passing on it,
Yeah, okay, sorry.
yeah.
Very
Yeah, we've got-
interesting.
But yeah, the air van which we were bringing here, so we are, yeah, it's usually 5 passengers. We have to have at least 150 kilos spare weight in it to be able to, just because again, it's a bit underpowered and getting it up over that hump takes a bit of, the airstrip actually is not short, it's just
Yeah.
rough.
It's flat.
Yeah.
One would assume the caravan that you'll use that mostly in the summertime to get 14 passengers away, so you
Yeah,
come with half empty load and then pick up from Glenorchy.
potentially, yeah, and that's what we do a lot in the Kodiak, but before, like, in our old fleet, we're actually kind of trying to avoid coming here if we could, because we were downloading ourselves to make it work.
Sure.
Yeah, so
Such
we've
a
changed that.
efficient
to
way.
Kodiak, but yeah.
Yeah. In terms of noise, you said the caravan's about the same noise as your other aircraft? Is that right?
It's quietest aeroplane
Quiet.
we operate, yeah, the airvan's probably the noisiest, then the Kodiak is significantly quieter, but a bit noisier than the caravan.
Okay.
Yeah, a bit noisier initially on takeoff, but as soon as we're airborne, we can bring its propeller RPM right back and it's very quiet.
Sure. Okay. Would that, in theory, if the airstrip was flatter then, would that solve some of the growth
Yes.
questions that
Yeah,
you've got?
so,
you
yeah,
potentially
there are other
invest in
commercial operators that just operate the caravans, we're actually the only Kodiak operator in the country.
Right.
That would potentially want to use the strip, and it wouldn't be anything like the numbers that the kind of operator was doing,
Yeah.
you know, but they can't bring those bigger aircraft in here because it's actually hard on them.
Makes sense. Any other questions?
And do you see that if the airfield is levelled, that there are opportunities for other typologies of aircraft that could be contentious?
I don't think so, like, it's not gonna make a difference for like your microlight operators that don't use a lot of the strip. I would sort of comment on the microlight side of things. I don't think banning them is particularly helpful, but I think if you're looking at the commercial activity where they're buzzing around all the time, that's very different than necessarily. Yeah, so I see it references in here as high volume or noisy stuff like microlights. Well, microlights are pretty quiet, especially road taxi engines. I get it if they're buzzing around at 1,000 feet over the town all day. That recreational aviation is moving more and more into that microlight space. So you said here, you want to enable recreational aviation. So the two are actually conflicting with each other.
Would we see if the runway was level, that takeoff times would be a lot shorter? Such a long run. If the
I mean, yeah, for the bigger airplanes, yes. I don't know what difference it would make to the noise that they're putting out. But yes, it would certainly enable us to get off the ground quicker. And so, I would just say from the air's point of view, we do take the noise abatement stuff incredibly seriously. We don't want to be, we operate in national parks. We don't want to be. So we comply with the noise contours. The only time we wouldn't do that is if there was a genuine aviation safety reason not to be. We're very careful about that. And through QMAC, we also take it very seriously operating in Queenstown, where we know there are noise issues and pinch points where we're flying over a lot. And so if we're used to dealing with that, and if the community has concerns, we want to deal with those as well in terms of the noise contour. And if we can help or modify things, we will. Happy to be asked by the council to help.
One more quick question.
You mentioned obviously amenities.
Yeah.
There's obviously some quite strong enabling factors that have come through. Do you feel that operators can bring a user pays model to the table?
If there's value in what we're getting, sure. I think that's probably one of the struggles in the whole aviation industry at the moment, is we're paying a lot more for getting a lot less, whether that's in terms of getting aircraft parts or fuel or just landing at airports, or the whole regulatory system that we're paying into is getting more expensive and we're not getting anything more out of it. So I think if there's value in that, yes, I think if there's value in us having a hangar here, if there's a market, if there's tourism growing in Glenorchy, there's an element of Queenstown airspace getting more and more congested. which may mean we can bring some business out here and some people out here that, as part of that experience, get to spend some money in the town, and great.
Okay, thanks, James. Appreciate your time. Your time is now up. Thank you for coming along. I thought you'd rather be in the air than here, so I'll let you get back to it. Right, have we got John online?
Yes.
John, can you hear me?
Sure can, yep.
We can,
Very large.
we can hear you clearly. Where are you beaming in from, John?
I'm just on the main street of Timaru, on my way back home to the farm, so I've just caught me at a time that I have to do it on my laptop in the car, so.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, it's good to see you parked up, not driving while you're talking to us.
Yes.
So, you've got 10 minutes, John, so take it away, and if there's any time at the end, we'll have some questions potentially.
Sounds good, thank you. Right, so my name is John Evans, and I'm a member of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, representing 1,300 predominantly recreational aircraft pilots. AOPA advocates for affordable and accessible areas to land, in this case the Glenorchy Aerodrome. A bit of background on me: I've held a pilot's licence for 15 years, a commercial pilot's licence for 5, and I operate a Cessna aircraft and have landed at Glenorchy on many occasions. We welcome the opportunity to submit and talk to my submission. Our overall position on the draft Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve Management Plan is in support. We recognise the work in past years to get to the point where we are at and where you are at. For example, the reserve being vested to QLDC versus DOC, operational functions managed by QAC, and in general the RMP's community engagement through the Glenorchy Aerodrome Group. My submission will focus on the 2 following points. The airstrip is strategically important, and ongoing accessibility for users, in our case recreational users. Broadly speaking, our submission and position is impartial concerning hangar infrastructure, emissions accounting and movement limitations through representing our members who are very much itinerant, low intensity and recreational, with the RMP presenting limited risk to our ongoing activity. There was much support within the submissions for the Glenorchy through the RMP process as a strategically important community asset. Often communities don't value assets, particularly ones they don't use regularly, if at all, until it needs them, such as when the Alpine Fault ruptures. In this case, Glenorchy will be serviced by the likes of Cessna Caravans, although there's limitations, as James has just mentioned, utilising an airstrip at a manageable cost for what could be months of exclusive aerial access, with the use of helicopters likely cost prohibitive to serve the needs of the community beyond the very short term. During the last major disruption, which was due to flooding with bridges compromised either side, helicopters were initially used as the typical scenario nationwide. This is often the rescue phase. Helicopters can focus their ability to access remote areas when cost is no factor. Fixed-wing aircraft generally fit into the recovery phase, where costs are less likely to be met by government resources and fall on individuals thinking weeks, perhaps months out. Funded support dries up fast. Fixed-wing aircraft, for example a Cessna Caravan, would transport people from Glenorchy at around 1/4 the cost of a helicopter per passenger seat. The aerodrome is not just a regional asset in these circumstances, but also a national asset, as international reputation and credibility becomes on the line in the community as the community supports foreign tourists affected by an emergency. If I was list a selection of vulnerable communities within New Zealand subjected to natural disaster risks, Glenorchy would have to be within the top 10. Remember Kaikoura just a few years back and ask how their community values their airfield asset. We advocate for accessibility for recreational users, which the plan provides for. The cost of use should be fair, while respecting this review process isn't to set the cost. I sympathise with ratepayers who submitted and have the general feeling throughout the community who may not be direct users or beneficiaries have a concern subsidising an asset they don't use. This concern may extend to paying for community assets or some might say liabilities such as reserves, museums, sculptures and councillors. But it is the part and parcel of what makes a district and a community. But in light of my previous point concerning strategic importance, there needs to be a share in how it is funded. In times of disaster, reserves, museums, and sculptures might not be of much use, but assets where you can operate aircraft to serve a community are. Furthermore, commercial aircraft activity and to a limited extent recreational visitors contribute to the local economy with the trickle-down effect. A concern for our organisation raised at other airports around New Zealand is the increasing cost recoveries council attribute to airfield management. For instance, even just the movement recording system, or the AIM system, cost us a sizable chunk of the landing fee it generates. If this review process was coded to the aerodrome as a cost recovery, no amount of landing fees would ever pay for it. It is respected that working out how to manage essentially a 2-hectare paddock has cost the ratepayers of QLDC immensely. Our membership base includes owners of microlight aircraft. A point made within my submission, which was to prohibit or submitting against prohibiting intensive high annoyance noisy activities such as microlight, is unfounded, and James talked a wee bit about that himself. An increasingly larger number of our memberships operate modern microlights, with the term microlight defined by takeoff weight. They are significantly quieter than early generation 2-stroke microlights, which are unlikely to ever frequent Glenorchy. I will happily take questions from the panel. Once again, many thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much for your time. Let's put it out to some questions for the panel. Mr. Barry, any questions from you?
Yeah, have we got an indication of the number of private landings and takeoffs there are?
In terms of from our perspective, or I don't know how the Glenorchy manager associates landings, whether they split up into recreation. I'd say reasonably low. It's a wonderful place to visit, but it's the aerodrome's been caught up in quite a lot of reverse sensitivity effects and a little bit of tension, so that there's probably recreational aviators that would like to go there more, but are kind of frightened off a wee bit.
Jenny, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, recreational use is less than 5%.
Any questions, Esther?
No, I think you've made it clear in your submission and what you've spoken to today on your concerns. Thank you.
John, just a question for me. You mentioned about 2-stroke microlights and they probably won't frequent Glenorchy Airstrip that often, if at all. Can you maybe elaborate on that a little bit more? Is it just their ability and range?
Yeah, so a lot of I've spoken on a few different hearings, and people associate sort of microlight with the what I call early generation. We call them rag and tube. So they're basically very, very basic level aircraft with modified lawnmower engines. Tend to operate in very short proximities where they take off on really fine days. Since I've written that, I understand there was an issue with a microlight operating commercially, towing gliders or something a few years back, which was probably the origin. But as James said before, the modern Rotax 4-stroke variants are very quiet.
And how big are they in terms of recreational use?
A growing number. I mean, in terms of traditionally the AOPA organisation has represented people with Cessna 172s, Piper Cherokees. They're your traditional 4-seater plane, but just to throw a number out, what these microlight types of aircraft might have been a single-digit percentage of our membership base a few years ago, and just given the costs of operating those traditional Cessna aircraft recreationally, there's a big shift through to these lighter, more cost-effective aircraft.
Right. Thanks for that information, John. Any other questions? No, I think we're all good. Thanks very much for your time. Appreciate you beaming in. Appreciate the information that you've given us today as well. So thanks very much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Okay.
The other technical information on that stuff, I can help.
Okay, we might pick that up offline. Thanks. Right, Andrew. Andrew's here, and lucky Andrew, you've got 20 minutes.
Oh, I'm not going to do that.
You got 10 minutes as an individual, And then you're representing the community association as well, I believe.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes, which one first?
Whichever you prefer, we've got you down as an individual first.
Okay.
And then CA second, so
Okay.
maybe separate the two out, so we
Yeah.
hear from you as an individual first.
Yep,
Right.
no problem. Yeah, right, so, yeah, my name's Andrew Green. And I'm here just to talk, as a recreational aircraft user of the, Airstrip. So yeah, I own and operate a Cessna aircraft, had a commercial pilot's license for the last 14 years. Just a couple of points really that I found the plan. I'm generally in support of the draft plan. I think it looks pretty good. But as per James and John's points as well, the section 8.2.6 prohibit intensive high annoyance activities such as microlights. Yeah, I just think that's probably not necessary as per the points that the guys made about modern microlights being quiet and fuel efficient, and generally, yeah, they are a growing number in the recreational aircraft scene. And the other point, as a recreational user, I realise this hearing is probably not the place to be setting costs attributed to users, but I sort of feel at the moment as a recreational user, the landing fees are probably a bit steep, and they're putting people off using the airfield for what you get in comparison to other airfields around the country. Yeah, I think it's at the moment $18.50 plus GST for a recreational user. Basically, like John said, you're landing in a 2 hectare paddock with no facilities. There's no toilets, no fuel, no maintenance, no hangars. And I just think that could be reviewed. Yeah, just talking to other recreational users, there's a lot that avoid coming to Glenorchy because of the cost. Yeah, and making up less than 5% of the flights. Yeah, maybe something could be done to sort of subsidise that, so recreational users start using the field a bit more, and you might generate more income from that. Yeah, so that's basically the 2 points I had on it as an individual.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
that was it. That was it. Everything else is pretty happy with.
You got 18 minutes left.
Yeah.
Do you want to ask questions to individual?
No, I mean, I think you've been pretty clear both through your submission and points made. I guess, you know, the cost versus recovery of costs is an ongoing debate.
Yep.
Like, is there any evidence that recreational users aren't coming other than?
Not
I guess just
nothing
within the
concrete,
community.
just from conversations I've had with people. Basically there's sort of, yeah, for the cost of landing there. Like myself personally, I avoid using it.
Okay.
Just yeah, I used it a couple months ago, did 2 landings, got a bill for $40-something, and I'm just not gonna use it.
And you're just, sorry to clarify, so you've got a commercial pilot's license,
Correct.
but you're not taking passengers, or you are?
No, I just as a personal transport and as recreational use.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
That's right.
Is it an expensive hobby?
Yeah. It is, yeah.
Like the most expensive hobby you can think of?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So everything costs a lot. Running the airplane, maintaining the airplane costs a lot, and then having to pay high landing fees on top of that, it all just adds up. And there's a lot of recreational users or recreational aircraft operators that aren't ultra wealthy. You know, they just do it because they love it and trying to make it work. So yeah, any cost savings are really, really appreciated.
Where do you usually take off from if you don't use
So I've just got my airplane kept on a private airstrip up for East Valley.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Barrick?
That was going to be one.
Oh.
Thank you.
Any other? No? Well, let's move into the CA.
Sorry.
Oh, you've got another one? Carry on.
Well, with regards to the private one that you're using, are they charging you a fee at all?
There is, it's very low, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. You've got 4 again.
Right, so now I represent as a committee member of the Glenorchy Community Association. So the Glenorchy Community Association fully supports the draft reserve management plan and its objectives and policies. The community has identified that the 50 hectare parcel of land known as the Blanket Bay Recreation Reserve site adjacent to the airstrip would be the preferred location in the event that the settlement has to be relocated or rebuilt after a natural disaster. Accordingly, we submit the following additions are made to the draft. So in section 2, the reserve description, I think there is a paragraph that describes that Blanket Bay Reserve. And just like a new sentence, we add that the community have identified this parcel as being the preferred location for relocating or rebuilding the settlement if required after an alpine fault event or other natural disaster. And then in 3.6 history, just like to add a new paragraph saying an outcome from the Head of the Lake adaptation work stream led by the Otago Regional Council in 2023 to 2025 was the realisation that much of the current Glenorchy settlement may be uninhabitable following an alpine fault rupture. The community have identified the 50-hectare Blanket Bay Recreation Reserve adjacent to the airstrip as preferred location in the event that the settlement has to be relocated and rebuilt. Future growth and development at the airstrip should not compromise this possibility. So yeah, basically, as a community, we just want to ensure that any future use or development of the airfield doesn't compromise the ability to be able to either shift the town or rebuild on that Blanket Bay Reserve land. Otherwise, the community's in support of the rest of the plan.
Okay.
I don't know if any questions on that one.
I'll start with a question actually. In terms of the community association, what will growth look like for aviation in Glenorchy?
I think managed growth, community, I mean, it is the growth of the airfield is great because it brings business to the town, keeps a lot of people employed. But there is also that noise sensitivity as well, that a lot of the residents are concerned about. So I think managed growth, I think what we've got with the Environment Court outcome limited to the 2019 numbers and trying to progress towards more sort of quieter and modern aircraft is a good way forward. So yeah, it's I think growth would be tolerated within the community as long as it's not making too much noise is probably the biggest thing.
And is it the thing back to 2019?
Yes.
You had skydiving operations, you had microlights towing.
Yep.
Things up into the air on a constant basis. Is it that the community is most concerned about versus say growth of more helicopter?
Yeah, I think that's probably the main thing. The helicopters are great because they come and then they leave. A lot of it with the skydive plane, the microlights that were constantly within a small, distance from the airfield, was probably the worst than helicopters and obviously fixed wing aircraft. They come and pick up passengers and then leaving. Definitely much better than a constant noise.
Okay. So as a whole, the community or the community association is okay with growth from helicopters and what we're seeing today.
And supportive of that, brings.
Questions, Esther Barry?
That was excellent, thank you.
Very good.
He's just contemplating. She's got a question.
No, I think I don't have any. It's very clear. These are, and I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Perfect.
All right, well, thanks, Andrew.
No,
Appreciate your time today.
No worries.
Lovely. You haven't used all your allocation up, so we've got Jenny here, which is fortunate. Is Jenny ready to go? Yes. Don't want to rush you too much. Take your time.
Yeah.
Oh, you got two of you today?
Yeah, here we go.
Okay, cool.
So you're
What have we got here?
Rosie Hill.
There
Hi.
we go. Hello,
Yes.
Rosie.
How you going?
Good.
I've got a handout and so do
Okay.
It's
Oh.
a large handout.
This. It's a
All right.
big
Uh,
Time to read it.
When it's time to read
read
it.
it at your leisure. Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
I'll
there
run.
we go.
I'll read it.
Well, you gotta read it. and
Oh,
give it. Summary.
Thank you.
Oh, right.
So, good morning, councillors. My name is Rosie Hill and Stephen Carter. And we both attended today just so that we can give two perspectives on the submission from Glenorchy. So First of all, I'll just give you a bit of sort of background on the Environment Court case and vis-a-vis the Reserve Management Plan and the role really between the designation and the RMP. And so that then feeds into Jenny's submission, which will take you through the exact relief that's been sought on the Reserve Management Plan. So I've provided you with some legal submissions. They are 10 pages, but I won't take you through word for word because we've obviously got a limited speaking slot. So I'm just going to talk you through some of the key points, and I've also attached the Environment Court case on the designation appeal through the PDP.
Yeah.
So just there at paragraph 5 of my legal submissions on page 1, I just synthesised the two kind of key themes, I guess, that are sought by the Glenorchy submission. The first of which is really to ensure that the Reserve Management Plan is drafted at a suitable level such that it provides an aspirational policy guidance and direction for future management and growth of the reserve, while leaving the designation and other management tools to actually set and determine the hard operating flight limits. So that's really about that theme of how much the Reserve Management Plan should or could overreach into what the designation already controls. The second theme is also achieving stronger policy support for possible future location of hangars and associated infrastructure at the aerodrome, and more specifically identifying the likely location and supporting requirements. So in terms of the first theme at paragraphs 7 through 9, I've set out some general sort of commentary around the Reserves Act and what a local purpose reserve does, and what Section 41 of the Reserves Act actually prescribes in respect of detailing management plans. As you'll know, because it's a local purpose reserve for aerodrome, a reserve management plan is not strictly required under Section 41 of the Reserves Act. However, that is a process that the Council as administrative body has elected to proceed with. So the main observation that I make in those submissions there is that the Section 23 of the Reserves Act, which sets out objectives in respect of local purpose reserves, is reasonably high level. It doesn't contain, I think, in my submission, a lot of detail around having specific rules and restrictions, for example, on amenity values and so forth. And I've contrasted that with recreation reserves in the legislation as well. So turning to paragraph 14, or 13 rather, the RMP, and this is the subject of a lot of the focus of the Heli GY submission, is that the RMP currently includes a number of quite prescriptive controls, which are effectively in the nature of hard operating limits or rules around flight numbers. And those appear mostly to recite the designation limits. In my submission, that is contrary to the Environment Court authority on the purpose and role of the RMP, and also will not lead to effective administration of the reserve in an enduring way. Interestingly, it is also at odds with any other similar local purpose RMP that I've found. So, for example, I had a look this morning at other nationwide reserve management plans for local purpose aerodrome reserves, and none of them seem to go into quite the same level of prescription around hard flight limits. I accept, of course, that every situation is really unique and there are different kind of community and contextual considerations to take into account, but it is worth noting, I think, that this does appear to be an extra layer to other ones that you see around the country. It also seems to be disproportionately prescriptive when compared to other QLDC reserve management plans. So, for example, I was recently involved in the Ben Lomond Reserve Management Plan process for Skyline, and that, in my opinion, by contrast, sets a reasonably high degree of policy guidance as to how that plan might change and evolve in the future. It also is quite a complex arrangement of a different number of commercial users and leaseholders within the reserve, but it seems to strike, in my opinion, quite a balance between sort of regulating that community vision while anticipating future growth and change. So At paragraph 16 there, I just said a bit of background in terms of the environment court case, which I've provided to you. So this was an appeal from the Waiuna Preserve Residents Association at the time on the PDP review, in respect of the designation for the airstrip. So importantly, this decision and the resulting conditions restrict the flight movements and thus noise to the existing levels of 2019. And there is no expansion provided for in the conditions. The interim environment court decision on designation set out some quite useful commentary on the role and purpose of the RMP vis-a-vis the designation. So I've included there at page 5 of my submissions the key extracts, and I've tabbed them for you in that case that I've handed up as well. So overall, I would say that it effectively sets out a hierarchy where the reserve management plan effectively sits above and guides decisions on the designation. And so in that case, the court was heavily guided when it was determining what were the appropriate limits for flight numbers and so forth in the designation by the statements in the reserve management plan, which anticipated basically limited or no growth. So the gist of the submission is that it really is that way round, not the other way. And I think it currently drafted, the RMP does kind of fit the other way around. It seems to adopt and recite those 2019 or designation limits into the reserve management plan, rather than stepping back and having sort of policy level guidance, which the designation can then particularize. And I think the point about why this is important is that the RMP is potentially quite a long-term document. It could last for decades if it is drafted at the right level of prescription, and it should. It's cumbersome to have to change it frequently, and to have statements in the RMP to the effect that any future changes to the flight numbers through the designation would require a change to the RMP first seems a bit back to front, in my opinion. Whereas if you have aspirational or community values in the RMP, which allow the designation to roll through any future changes, that seems to accord more with the Environment Court's decision on that hierarchy. And I think another reason about that enduring nature is you've just also heard, about changing community expectations, changing environmental factors and changes in technology as well, which might mean there's a need to revisit or relook at those total flight numbers. And the designation is the appropriate process to do that. So to the extent that there is, I guess, as I keep saying, a reciting or a duplication of existing limits which are already in the designation, I say that that's unnecessary, and it will probably create inefficiencies in the future if those are needed to be reconsidered. On the second theme about hangars and future facilities, I've set out at paragraphs 23 and 24 just a bit of background about the Glenorchy consenting and operations. So they're currently operating under a consent issued in 2021 for a finite duration. So it has 4 years, and that is to run until December this year. It will lapse for using a hangar off-site, the Glenorchy Airstrip, basically. So Glenorchy has participated in this reserve management plan process for a number of years now, I guess waiting for the right time to have sufficient certainty in the plan that it will be able to have a consenting pathway to develop a hangar. And the latest drafting of the RMP is really positive in that regard. So I would describe the relief on that as being more of a fine tuning than a significant change. What GY has sought is some even stronger sort of policy direction that at least 2 hangars are anticipated and provided for, and similarly for supporting infrastructure facilities as well, and potentially as well some identification around where would be the most appropriate location for those. And I guess I've just set out as well that the councillors will be very aware of this, that a separate resource consenting process will still need to be gone through, which will control scale, location, built form, visibility, and environmental effects of any such hangar. But obviously it will create quite a significant commercial certainty for the submitter, as well as community benefits in the form of resilience for the airstrip and potentially diversification of its use.
Now, Rosie, your 10 minutes is up.
So
So we'll have to stop you there. Sure, you could go on for hours.
yeah,
on
no,
this one.
I will stop there. Does Jenny have time to quickly talk to her submission points?
Uh,
I can just outline for you.
Yeah, maybe summarise it, because your counterpart here has used up all your time, but maybe give us a quick summary in a minute if you could.
Yeah, sure. So
Thank you.
the first document I've provided is just a basic background to the consenting that Glenorchy has been involved in with since I was involved, which is from 2017. We've lodged a number of consents that were like for locating a hangar at the airstrip. But while that 2016 RMP was in place, that wasn't possible to get consented. So as Rosie said, that currently the situation is that the helicopters are stored at Reese Valley Station. In the interim, there was an option put forward of locating the permanent hangar at Reese Valley Station as well. That raised a lot of concern in the community, and a lot of the feedback was, we've got an aerodrome, locate the infrastructure there.
Jenny, if you had one ask of this panel in 30 seconds, what would it be?
To remove the strict conditions from within the RMP, because they're better located within the designation, to make sure that, as Rosie said, the RMP is the long-term guiding document that doesn't have to then be changed and altered in order to enable future growth and or changes in technology that mean that there can be more flights within the bucket. So that's my key request. And then just some, as Rosie said, just in terms of a bit more guidance as to where those hangars would be located, making sure that the removal of that policy that limits fuel storage. Don't know if you guys noticed the truck there. It'd be beneficial to be able to locate that within a permanent storage facility.
Okay.
30 seconds is probably out.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So just to clarify, what I've provided you there is a table, and I've just gone through each of the provisions within the RMP and some track changes with commentary alongside. So hopefully that's quite helpful for you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, bit of reading for us to do now. Thanks for that. Appreciate your time. Yeah,
Thanks.
and
Thank you.
yeah, appreciate all the work with your community too. So yeah. Sorry, we had to cut you short.
No problem. Lots of questions.
I know, so did I. I had lots of questions as well, but we're gonna keep it there. Right, Thomas.
Oh, I've got a text from Thomas. He's
Oh.
been called into fly, so he
Okay.
is not able to make the hearing, sorry.
Oh, right. Okay.
Literally just came in 10 minutes ago.
We can use the time slot.
Right. Just. Okay, so well, now that the hearings are over, you got the agenda there? We'll have to move the deliberation. Okay, so we've got a resolution here in front of us. Bring it up here. I wasn't ready. I was expecting another speaker. That'll be on the. There it is. Okay. We'll need a mover and seconder for this one, but I'll just read it through. It's the appropriate place. Union Services Committee will panel today. So we're going to note the contents of this report, note all submissions of the draft Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve Management Plan 2025, and hear any submitters who wish to speak to their submission, and recommend to the Community and Services Committee following the hearing a final form of the Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve Management Plan 2025 with changes as outcome of a consultation process. So we don't need to move this yet though, do we? 'Cause we have to go to
No,
deliberation.
I feel that you need to, you concluded your hearing, but, there is also the expectation that there is, that you will commence your deliberations, or at least give the officers some direction on what needs,
Yeah.
what further questions you may have in order to proceed forward with your deliberations.
Okay. Yeah, no, so we're gonna adjourn for a little bit longer than 5 minutes, I feel. So we might take a half-hour break, grab a coffee,
I'd
have a good
appreciate some
stop.
time to read through.
Yeah, we've got a bit of reading
Yeah.
material now. So we're gonna probably break for about half an hour. We'll be back at 11, and then we're gonna head into deliberations. So you're welcome to stay for
Yeah,
deliberations.
that's good idea.
You can't participate in the deliberation though, so it'll be a discussion between the panel and the council officers at that time. So, yeah, thank you very much for your time this morning. Welcome to stay or get back up in the air. Your choice. Right. Thank you very much. All right, ready to go, everybody?
Yes.
Good. Let's kick into it then. I know there's 20 parts. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, have you any comments, Jamie?
So. I think. Well, certainly, like,
Anybody?
made a note of a number of points and submissions, both written and spoken, that I believe we can address in deliberations today.
Yep.
And probably most easily addressed by questions from the panel as we work through in whatever way you guys want to.
Yep.
Work through either the submissions or the plan. That's
Well, does anyone have any desire to work through it either way? I'm happy to work through submissions and then go through the whole plan.
I mean, the plan itself is sort of broken into each of the different areas of the subject matter, and that's how the submissions were, the submission survey was structured as well. And then how the submission table is, it's all sort of aligned.
All right, it sounds like we're going on structure on the framework of the plan then. I'll give it to you go. And I'm happy for you to step us through each section if you like. Just for clarification for those in the audience, I have clarified with Jane, who's our Democracy and Services Advisor, that we can't ask questions in the floor. So this will be a deliberation just for the officers and the staff. And on the panel. Okay, Jenny.
Can I also just note, it's always helpful to have a track change version in response to detailed submissions. I haven't, however, had quite a chance to go through the track change version yet,
Right.
but that is something that can be responded to in the final version of the plan as we make our own track changes.
Okay.
But I have had a chance to read the legal subs, and then obviously, so this is in response to Glenorchy's submission, Action Helicopters, and Jenny's summary is predominantly what in the submission that was put forward. Actually, I do think it might be easier to go through by submissions, given that there is not a huge volume of them.
Oh, should we start with questions then from?
Maybe just kind of review the themes as a starting point. So James Stokes mentioned that the growths are not near the cap. And runway surfaces as a limiting factor. John Evans mentioned about highlighting the rescue and recovery role in the emergency factors of the community. And he was representing the community association and recreational user. Sorry, no, he wasn't. He was representing the pilots. Yeah.
Right.
Predominantly. So we also have the mention of microlights and how that's changing, and that came up for a few submitters in terms of the annoyance factor and how that's changed over time, and that light aircraft, we're kind of limiting light aircraft at the moment, and probably shouldn't be kind of focusing on that. We've got some strong, I guess, in terms of mentioning numbers, of submissions, we've got 23 total submissions, 12 support, 24, sorry. 5 neutral and 4 opposing.
That would be 6 neutral.
6 neutral with
Just
the
to
addition.
incorporate film tigers.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And then we've had some discussion around the flight hours limitations. And then some of the written submissions, but not in the oral submissions we've heard about extending to simple twilight versus operating hours. We've heard about infrastructure and amenities. So the need for amenities from the operator's point of view. We haven't necessarily heard that from the community point of view. We've heard about the need for infrastructure and with regards to hangars. Mixed views on that. Operators are supportive, recreational users seem to be supportive. And we've heard about the actual where they would sit in the reserve management area and how that could be useful to know. Sorry, I'm just kind of.
Do you want me to? Yeah, and I can do the.
Yes,
Same.
please.
Okay. So I will go
It's
through.
really good to have that recap of the overview of what we've heard today. So that would be useful.
So I'll just go through the sections of the plan, and highlight the themes that have come through from the written submissions and also submissions today, and in particular those points that would potentially be addressed.
Yeah.
I think the principal purpose of the airstrip is really well heard, that it is critically important strategically for a number of factors, that the emergency use in the event of a primary earthquake, most likely is particularly important for that, and ongoing protection of the airstrip for emergency response. But that it does have a strong importance to the community for the various industries. But I think the thing that has come through most strongly in submissions is recognition of the filming industry that might not have been captured so much in the plan itself. Certainly, I heard it through that a few of the submitters have supported Queenstown Airport as supporting as the operator or as council's contracted operator. That has certainly been going well. They sit on the Glenorchy Airstrip Consultative Governance Committee as well, and provide that operational advice and support. And I would just make a point with regards to the airstrip itself, that Queenstown Airport have acknowledged and identified that the airstrip will likely need resurfacing, in addition to the rolling that occurs and filling in of the rabbit holes, etc. That and that's not an upgrade of the airstrip as such, but it is a maintenance item that has been identified that will be over and above what typically happens there year on year.
What levels that at in terms of planning, have they budgeted for it already, or they?
Well, we wouldn't, QLDC would need to
No.
budget for that over and
QAC.
above,
Yeah.
the agreement with QAC. So that would be a capital
Right,
project that would need to be included in
For
our
QLDC.
council budgeting.
right, so not coming to the next LTP or any plan.
That would be the way,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that, when you say resurfacing, that's retaining grass, but
My recollection, it's stripping the topsoil and redoing it.
Oh.
But, I'm not aware and can
Yeah.
report back after talking to QAC as to whether or not that involves removing the hump, which I understand is quite a
Hmm.
big part of the
Right,
airstrip
yeah.
topography, if you like, and whether or not that be addressed by that,
Mhm.
potential piece of work.
Okay.
In terms of the layout planning, a couple of the operators identified that that would be helpful to understand what that layout planning could look like. There has been some work done in that space with Astral Aviation, who was in the aviation consultant that we had on board for a number of years to assist us with implementation of ensuring that we are complying with the CAA regulations, stalling games, and all of those sorts of things. So there is some reports that are with council as to the best or the locations for potential hangars. So I can distribute that, and that could be potentially reflected.
In Harry GY's submission, there was an error in the mapping, was it?
Yes, the map that is in the draft RNP will be
Needed.
redone by our comms team when the final form of the plan is adopted and ready to go on our website. As you know, we typically for the draft plan, it's a not the final version,
Right.
it's a web draft.
Do you want us to ask questions as we go, or?
We've got two more, and then we could go through
Sure.
your individual questions.
Yeah.
Obviously use is the primary one that has been submitted on, and that conversation around, the flight limits that are set through the designation conditions versus, potentially the RNP being more aspirational. I would note that the written submissions are a broader range from no development and no use through to no limits, and that is a constant theme in any of our engagement with the community. There is both ends of the spectrum, most definitely. And typically, as you can see in the early engagement summary, obviously the aviation sector is supportive of the aviation use, whereas the Glenorchy community has more of a range, reflecting the types of employment and reasons why people are in Glenorchy, from reducing development and use through to being supportive of the airstrip and its various uses. The microlight point, I think, has come through quite strongly as well. And just from an officer's point of view, the inclusion of that, it stems from the noise management plan, which is also an important document, that was to address the high volume, high annoyance activity. There could be other ways to address that, rather than singling out a particular type of aircraft that is, sounds like it's undergoing its own evolution and efficiencies. So that the plan's not out of step what's happening in the industry, and the use of the aircraft, the use of the term microlight could be, it could be more flexible. I think there were a number of submissions in the written submissions too around the flight allocation methodology, and particularly around the use of the bucket, and I can talk more to that in deliberation, but as we continue today, as to where that originated from and what that can mean, and the practicalities of the flight allocation, and I just note that Christina and Priscilla from our property team are here as well. That's the team that does the flight allocations and the leases and licenses. User pays, fee setting, one that's both in written and spoken submissions today. Development and infrastructure. I think there's general support, although I would also point out there are a couple of submissions that say no development, but general support, and that is a big change from the 2016 plan, moving to enabling some development. I guess the level of development is the thing to decide. And definitely a lot of support for some public toilets in the waiting area. What form that takes has not really been specified in the management plan or through the submissions.
So do you think we need to beef out some of the, if we agree to facilities, do we need to add another layer within the RMP?
I think the reserve management plan could give some direction as to how that is anticipated, and being clear on whether or not that is something that, that QLDC as the aerodrome operator would deliver or not. The reserve management plan could provide more direction, clarity on that. I think it was really interesting, the submissions around the carbon and noise emissions. There were a number of written submissions around the challenges with carbon emissions and implementing that the small airstrip, like here the small general aviation. But yeah, just acknowledging the advances in technology for the aircraft and how the airstrip can or does not support that. The governance and community input, I think there was general support, and a couple of submissions noted that some more transparency or awareness around the Glenorchy Airstrip Consultative Governance Committee, the way that operates could be appreciated.
Sorry, can I just clarify what you're saying? Are you saying the communication around how that operates is better? Should be better.
It could be made more transparent. I would note that all of the minutes are published on our website, but yeah, certainly some more direction to that committee to better publicise the information and engagement there.
Now there's a council representative on that, councillor.
There's a council or representative. There's also under the guidance in the reserve management plan and the designation conditions, there is a requirement that a member of council staff that also sits on that and assists. But currently we have about 4 or 5 of us, including the property team, that regularly attend.
Is the CA involved with that as well?
Oh, sorry.
The community association.
Yeah, so that is the QLDC councillor, a member from the Glenorchy Community Association, a member from the Waiuna Residents Preservation Society, a member from Blanket Bay, and then an operator representative in Queenstown Airport.
Okay.
There are a couple of submissions that noted it's quite heavily weighted in terms of the community, as opposed to operators. There was a fixed wing operator was invited to come on a year or so ago to provide that balance. There's no limit as to the number of representatives on that committee, but
What's the name of the committee again? Sorry, my head was in election stuff.
it's quite a mouthful. The Glenorchy Airstrip Consultative Governance Committee.
Oh gosh,
See,
Airstrip.
GACGC.
yeah,
Glenorchy Airstrip
Was the
consultative.
Yeah,
Governance.
lovely.
Glenorchy Airport, Glenorchy Airstrip Consultative Governance.
And the functions of that committee, that was established through the first reserve management plan, but it was strengthened the designation conditions, the functions and the representatives.
So by the designation decision.
Yeah, but it was established in the first reserve management plan.
Okay.
And then just the other points, yeah, obviously the number of submissions from the filming industry, and the importance of the use of the airstrip for the filming industry. But some more clarification on where the infrastructure could go. And the changing of the name to Glenorchy Aerodrome rather than Glenorchy Airstrip, and or just the Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve was the name of the reserve when it came over from DOC. The gazetting of the reserve was done under DOC, and at the time the gazette notice was local purpose airport reserve, and under the designation and as per the CAA conventions, it's an aerodrome. So it's a Glenorchy Aerodrome and the designation conditions. So
Technically. it's an aerodrome.
QLDC has never really made a determination on exactly the naming as such.
Right. So what impact would that have? Or should we wait till later?
Well, we renamed the Ben Lomond and Queenstown Hill Reserve Management Plan to. the-
So it being an
the
aerodrome,
names.
or naming it an aerodrome would be more precise to what it actually is in the designation, right?
It would be possible to rename it. We'd have to go back and check our naming policy which is quite old.
Naming policy, right.
To see if there's no hooks or if there's not there'd potentially be a formal process, but there is nothing that I'm aware of that would prevent council from renaming it.
Does it, I mean, are you, just for minutes, so it is technically from CAA convention an aerodrome?
It is an aerodrome.
Yes. Okay.
So just to clarify that, I think we would need to, rather than just change it as part of this process, we would need to have a policy that would guide the renaming.
Yeah, sure there will be one. Any other points? There we go. I'm just wondering whether you could speak to, with the RMP, steers the designation or the other way around. If you could speak to that with your history and understanding.
Yeah, I think based on my involvement over the past 10 years, the plan had actually been drafted just as I started at QLDC. One of my first jobs was to take it to the hearing. So I wasn't actually involved in the drafting of the first reserve management plan, and the designation had been notified to be rolled over with no conditions just prior to when I started with QLDC, but I did attend the hearing as the requiring authority representative for stage one of the plan, and then I was a key expert witness at the appeal hearing, the Environment Court hearing. I was there in both the capacity as the QLDC requiring authority and as the landowner reserve administrator. I think it might be helpful for me to actually read out the part of the decision that came from the Environment Court.
Yeah.
Prior to the Environment Court process, we had notified the intent to review the reserve management plan. That was largely in response to, obviously we had the 2016 plan, we had implemented the majority of the plan with regards to the setting up of the infrastructure and the management framework for the airstrip. So we've installed the fencing, we've installed a new public road, we've installed aims, etc. So we've established the Glenorchy Airstrip Governance Committee. So we've undertaken the first management plan was about setting up, and we'd undertaken most of that. And in that process, it was realised that the policies in that plan were not fit for purpose, nor were they really workable because they were based on a limit that had never been defined because there had never been any recording of information. So that was also one of the first things we did was set up aims to start understanding what the level of use actually was.
Mhm.
Whereas the 26 RMP said, keep the level of use as to the 2016 levels, but we never had the information and DOC never recorded any information either. So that was the driver for the review of the management plan prior to 2019, I think the Environment Court hearing was in 2019? Yeah. Or was it 2021? 21? Yeah, it was after COVID. So just briefly lost my train of thought there. Oh, we've notified the intent and then council decided to await the outcome of the designation appeal before continuing with the reserve management plan process. That was a decision that council made. And yeah, so I will read out the section that the submitters helpfully provided us, noting that it's not the entire decision, which I can see around. This was a key part of the proceedings and the decision. I would note that the RMP said 2016 levels of use, but the final decision was 2019 levels of use. And the reason for that was because that was the first entire year that data had been collected. And it was also anecdotally the busiest year that the Airstrip had experienced as well, because growth had been.
And that's when skydiving was also in operation.
Skydiving was in full operation.
Microlights.
The microlights actually had finished in that before that year, so they might have had some of their flights captured, but not for. And they also only operated in the winter months.
Right. The skydiving was how much? Oh, the percentage of the commercial use?
Glenorchy was 50% and skydive was 50% of the commercial use, and then the remainder was about 20%.
Recreational.
Well, I would say probably 15% other commercial use, and then 5% recreational.
Okay.
That's just an approximation.
Yeah.
Actually, I will read the actual decision. Right, actually, I'll just summarize this, and noting that this is what the submitter provided. It's not the complete environment court designation, but I think it's just the salient points anyway. The designation is the appropriate RMA instrument for defining the extent of the designated work, enabling it and protecting it, and managing its environmental effects. By contrast, the RMP deals with both the use of the aerodrome and its effects. That is for the purposes of the Reserves Act rather than the RMA per se. Nevertheless, the RMP is of relevance to our determination of the most appropriate outcome in the appeal. That is in the sense that it is an operative statutory document that expresses relevant QLDC commitments to the local community about how the development of the aerodrome and environmental impacts will be managed. And it goes on to say, we, the hearings, the Environment Court panel, give significant weight to the RMP as an operative statutory instrument including its plain intention that aviation activities be maintained to the current levels. It is, of course, QLDC's prerogative to revisit the RNP objectives as it is progressing through its review. However, we have regard to the RNP as it stands. So it was definitely a determining factor in that it was the operative document at the time. The Environment Court did decide to go over and above what was decided in the Reserve Management Plan, in that they agreed to the 2019 levels of use.
Well, it seems to me the designation is a much harder process to change than the RNP, which council has control of on its own.
I think that just a comment on that, I don't think one is necessarily easier or harder. In speaking from the Reserves Act and we're obviously much more involved in RNP processes. It is a very public process in that there are several steps that are set out that you must engage with the public for 2 months, so significantly longer than RMA periods. And the public has the opportunity to submit twice. And there is a strong directive in the Reserves Act that it is a community facing document. The RMA obviously also has requirements around public notification if that is determined. Public can engage in RMA processes, but not in any appeal processes, and there's no appeal rights on the Reserves Act. So they're quite different. Well, they're not quite different. They still have a big element of public participation. From my experience, the Reserves Act process is a far more community-friendly process than the RMA process.
Which could be a little bit more litigious, honestly.
Yeah,
Rather than
so,
putting words into your mouth.
I mean, our reserve management plans can also
Yeah, that's
be
true.
litigious. I would also, so Reserves Act processes go to the council committees for adoption as well, and that's also a public process. And that was part of the challenge at the time. I guess the community had participated to a high degree of engagement in the RMP process, both of them, with all the several versions that we've done. The designation was only submitted on by one party, and then it was at the appeal stage that there were official additional parties brought into that process through the official RMA process, but the public could not attend hearing or participate in that. So I think that's yeah, it is a difference in terms of how the community can engage. In terms of whether or not it's easier or harder to change a reserve management plan or a designation, the Reserves Act requires administering bodies to keep reserve management plans relevant. There's no hard and fast rules within council as to when we review our reserve management plans. It is dictated by resources and pressures. So if there is particular pressure in an area, then that management plan will be prioritised for review if agreed by council. So we make amendments to reserve management plans. You can do minor amendments as well, or partial reviews, and those are kept, I'd like to say, under continual review in an ideal world, but typically that happens as and when needs arise and resources permit.
So, based on this, and this RMP is very different to any other one we've done. How, based on the submissions and some of the commentary there, how do we keep the RMP flexible and ensure it does have that flex, so that it doesn't go for 10 years and then it's not fit for purpose.
Yeah, you're right in saying this is very unique. It is, and the aviation experts and everyone who's been involved have acknowledged that Glenorchy Airstrip is particularly unique within all of New Zealand, even within airports and airstrips.
It's weird.
Yeah, and I think that's its highly sensitive location. That it's not in the middle of a rural farming, well, it is in the middle of a rural farming area, but it does have other very sensitive qualities to it in terms of landscape and the high visitor experience here.
Can you clarify, you know, the Reserves Act, the differentials between a special purpose reserve and say a recreational reserve that's open to the public?
So under a recreation reserve, they're primarily for the public's access and enjoyment. And that comes first, and you are required to prepare a reserve management plan, ideally within 5 years of investing, and then, you know, reserve management plans should be sort of a 10-year document, but kept under continual review, ideally under the Reserves Act. A local purpose reserve has been set aside for a specific purpose for that administering body. So, and to my knowledge, there's no limit as to what that purpose can be, but it might be for a community centre or a library, or we've got local purpose civic centres. We have a Queenstown nursery and kindergarten, that's local purpose reserve. It can be for a gravel yard, or it can be for an airstrip. And that means that the administering body does not have to allow other uses or public access. It is set aside for that particular use.
So back to my question, how do we build in flex into the RMP?
I think
Well, there's avenues now, but they're not
yeah,
necessarily stated.
I think there's a range of ways in which that we could do it. And Sophie, feel free to comment.
Thanks.
It could be lifted right up to being much more high level and aspirational. I think we'd need to revisit the scope of the RMP as was notified if we do that. It could have acknowledgement within the policies that adherence to the designation conditions is quite prescriptive. And there could be potentially a threshold or a trigger in which you revisit that decision to stick within those limits.
Yeah.
Or there could be an acknowledgement in the plan that it does need to be continually revisited as to whether or not it's still relevant and fit for purpose, and whether or not a review should be expedited, I guess.
Yeah.
Can I just?
Yeah. That's great.
So, I don't know, I guess I'm thinking kind of big picture here, that the Environment Court kind of my understanding of it is that it's about sustainably managing it. It's kind of where it landed, rather than just having a growth, permissive growth kind of baseline. And we heard from submitters today about you know, the RMP is a guiding document, and this sort of comes through from the Environment Court, but essentially it doesn't override it. So to me, the designation is still the hierarchical. The RMA tool is still has precedence over it, but I'm also hearing that, you know, the RMP is cumbersome, but as staff point out, we can review that. And yes, it is cumbersome, but it acknowledges the community aspirations which the designation doesn't achieve as well as that we can achieve. And then we've got the noise management plan, which is kind of sitting alongside both of those. So that's kind of come about through looking at the monitoring, and the Environment Court decided that the 2019 figures, rather than 2016, because we didn't have the data, allowed that kind of future movement, and we haven't reached those caps. So I guess in terms of like where we land today, in terms of achieving some direction that would help our officers to kind of move forward, is what are we hearing today from our submitters that we can achieve within the RMP as it currently stands, that gives some flexibility, but also acknowledge the whole democratic kind of aspirations of all submitters that we've heard over time. It's kind of, I don't know, that's where I'm kind of trying to determine what we can achieve today. And so we heard about, you know, a few issues that we could possibly speak to in determining, for example, where hangars might sit on a site plan, which would give some certainty. So there's some uncertainty from our operators, and they obviously, for commercial viability, require some certainty. And then we've got maybe some opposers in the community that are concerned about noise, etc. So it's about you know, deliberating on the different user groups, but ensuring that there can be some certainty within the caps or within the instruments that we have available.
Can I just make one final point about the designation?
Yeah.
Council's position was to have 100% growth. So council was defending growth of the Airstrip in the Environment Court process.
Right.
It was the appellants that had the position of no growth. The Environment Court decided in favour of a limit, and put more weight on the role of the community through the community consultation governance authority and the noise management plan, and determined that within that noise management plan, the consultative governance committee could put more restrictions on the noise limits. So I think that's just council sought to protect their piece of infrastructure, if you like. So in the Environment Court panel landed just to the side of we could read to that well, but I think that is council would need to determine to revisit that and seek to go for a position that had previously been appealed in, well, effectively. So I think that's probably all we need to say more on the designation conditions. But just to add, perhaps the wording of the management plan could be looked at in terms of making those policies slightly less prescriptive, without changing the intent, which I believe would need to, if we remove reference to that limit, I think that would not be in the scope of what was notified.
Yeah, I think the only point I was sort of trying to make here was making sure that we do have that fix in that RMP, so that we don't go 10 years and it's not the purpose. And I'm not sure if we're going to solve that today or not, but we do have processes for it. And I guess if we hear enough noise from the community and the operators, then that may happen anyway sooner rather than later in the 10 years.
With regard to the limit, was it a recommendation from the Environment Court or was it a mandatory?
The appeal was to have a limit in accordance with 2016 or a cap on the numbers of flights. The Environment Court decided on a noise contour, which is how other airports use that. So noise monitoring at literal physical points in proximity to the airstrip. But the best way, and this was unusual as well, the best way to kind of create those thresholds and that overall limit they determined was to use the annual amount, the annual total of the 2019 flights. Very unusual, and like there are no airstrips in New Zealand that have this. And most airports would just have noise contours. And then within that they can do is presumably, I mean, I'm the expert, that's for sure. Presumably they can do as many flights as what they can. It's just the noise contour that they must be within.
Okay.
So we could, I mean, we'll do track changes to the document anyway. There could be some suggested wording in here or some alterations to the wordings to acknowledge that this does need to remain relevant and evolve. However, I think within those limits, and then that a change to those limits would require a review of management.
I'm happy with that. I think that's probably the most appropriate way to move forward with this specific topic anyway. If you make those changes, maybe send us the word. Yeah, quick look at it before it's signed off.
Can I just talk to the limits as well with regards to the operating hours? That's come up a number of times, particularly with filming and can we do one-offs? So that is determined by the designation conditions. And just a really important point, we have to adhere to the designation conditions until they are changed. So changing something in the reserve management plan will not change our ability to give approvals, because we would then be contravening those designation conditions, and QLDC would have the enforcement action taken upon QLDC. So we can't issue one-off exemptions to that through the management plan, but the management plan could signal that that is a change in the designation conditions that could be sought, and potentially that may not require a full notice of requirement. That could be done under other provisions of the RMA, such as a minor operation.
Yes, because there was a lot of submissions from the film industry, specifically on civil twilight and being able to operate, especially in the summertime, around before 8 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock at night. If we could at least signal that we would want to do one-off exemptions, or so we get a amazing blockbuster film which supports the economy here, what would that sound like? What would that read like? And it doesn't have any weight to it. It just signals the direction, doesn't it?
Can I ask a question on that? Because I wanted to clarify that. So I thought that the RMP states 8 AM to 8 PM, but I thought that the court's phrasing was 8 AM till civil twilight.
No, it is, so the condition in the designation is, no, just double check, I'm pretty sure that reflects what's in the reserve management plan. Hours of operation for all aircraft operations, except those specified under the exemptions in condition 11, which I think is emergency and Department of Conservation, shall be between 0800 hours or morning civil twilight, whichever is later, and 2000 hours or evening civil twilight, whichever is earlier. So that's 8
That's
PM.
the designation. Right?
That's the designation.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that arose from the reserve management plan,
Okay.
2016 wording. So it's 8 AM to 8 PM. you want me to read the exemptions? Because that did cause a
yeah,
little bit of
just
confusion with some
clarify
of the
stop and
minutes.
emergency.
Exemptions. Aircraft landing or taking off in an emergency or for precautionary safety reasons. Emergency flights required to rescue people or transport human organs, medical personnel, and medical emergency. Aircraft using the aerodrome due to unforeseen circumstances. Flights required to meet the needs of a national or civil defence emergency. Flights certified by Minister of Defence as necessary for reasons of national security, and aircraft undertaking fire and search and rescue activities. Doesn't actually
Oh,
include
not
Department of
that.
Conservation, sorry. It's,
Although this is a fire on dockland.
so basically emergency purposes.
Mm.
Sorry, there is, subject to the, then, so going back to, so this is the challenge with designations. Governing the use, it's not community friendly or pilot
No.
friendly.
Mm.
So the noise management plan conditions are set out as well, which provides for the role of the Glenorchy Airstrip. Noise abatement procedures, etc. It also says, subject to the conditions of this designation, including those flight times, that noise management plan may impose additional or more stringent restrictions on aircraft movements, including without limitation caps on maximum numbers or aircraft movements and or aircraft operational hours, whether for particular types of aircraft or purposes or generally. But it can also allow for curfew exemption of flights servicing the Department of Conservation, provided these agreed with the Glenorchy Airstrip Consultative Governance Committee.
Oh. That's where the dock piece came.
Yes. So in a nutshell, those
Sure.
hours are fixed in the designation conditions with the exception of emergency purposes, and the noise management plan can override that exemption for dock purposes, but it can also include additional controls should it wish to. In agreement with the Glenorchy District Consultative Governance Committee, it is their function to sign off the noise management plan,
So controls, not exemptions. So,
except for the Department of Conservation. Those conditions could be revisited through an amendment
to the designation and the RMP.
to the designation conditions, but the RMA provides for very small things like an alteration to a boundary as a minor alteration. But
This wouldn't be small. Well,
it's up to consents to determine that, but probably not if you change the condition.
Mm.
And then if you are doing an alteration that's not minor, then the regulatory authority can serve notice on those that they deem to be affected, which would be the members of the,
Yeah.
well, I don't know, but potentially Waiona, potentially Blanket Bay, potentially members of the community, so. Yeah,
So, in the purpose of this panel, with the RMP, hearing the submissions from film and commercial sector, asking for obviously exemptions before and after 8 o'clock. Would that mean we've got actually some wording in the RMP if we wish to signal that? It doesn't necessarily mean obviously that it's.
it would be a signal to the change of those conditions that we would not, obviously we don't have control over the final outcome of that.
correct. Yes.
But we could seek to undertake that.
Right.
I think it would be helpful to understand what those one-off exemptions
Right.
would look like, and that could be quite difficult to quantify for the
Mm.
film industry. I think there's scope within the existing limits to provide those sorts of approvals. If it was obviously meeting those curfew conditions, but hypothetically, if one of the operators had a maximum of and currently there's a daily limit and an annual limit. If
Right.
there was a filming operation that came along that exceeded those limits, provided they were still within the designation limits, but it went over and above their commercial agreement.
Yeah.
There could be a mechanism to undertake that sort of one-off approval.
That currently obviously doesn't exist in terms of,
It does exist.
it does,
It's,
for film.
well, it's not that specific, but we do have a special approval process within the concession methodology, whereby if operators are getting to within 80% of their allocation, then they can come to council in the consultative governance committee to ask for more flights. No one's ever used that.
That's for the year.
Yeah, that is for
Not
the
the
year,
day
but-
or the week or whatever.
But that could be amended to be a one-off approval for an event.
Still come off the allocation, but they would potentially be able to use more of their allocation that day or month.
It's something we need to work through, but it could be in addition to the allocation.
Yeah.
Within the limits of the designation conditions.
Yeah.
Until those were changed.
Yes. Well, I guess the question for the panel is there a desire to leave the door open for this or not? No. My position is like film is growing significantly in this district and certainly for Glenorchy residents, and the operators here. The film industry is quite important. But just one voice here, so.
It would be on a applied for basis.
So the current policy is ensure the flight allocation methodology, and those policies enable some flexibility within that methodology, so it can change in response to operator requirements. Ensure the flight allocation methodology has a provision for a special approval process where commercial operators can apply for additional flights if they are nearing the limits in their individual agreement and there are flights available in the bucket. There's nothing in there that prevents them doing a current, one-off of a filming opportunity came along and we need, but that could be further clarified in these policies to indicate that for the filming industry in particular, the nature of the filming industry is, all on or not on at all, that perhaps that is anticipated, and that would be the appropriate way to give approval to those flights over and above what they had within their annual allocation. It could also go over daily limits that are set in those agreements. The daily limits are not set within the reserve management plan.
Just from a pragmatic point of view, how hard is it for them to have whatever it's called, the special approval process? Well,
it's never been tested.
Okay.
We set it up at the time that we first did the commercial agreements. I think there is an undertaking by council to respond to them within 5 days or something, but again, that sits outside the management plan, so that can be changed as and when is needed.
But yeah, it's good to know that provision's there, and and I think that actually there's a lot of enablers within what we currently have. I guess what we're hearing is that there's a lot of operators that are saying we want to get our value back, but there's enablers that aren't being used. So
Correct, and as I understand it, and maybe Christine or Priscilla, the flights that have been sought by the operators have been granted to date. There is a use or lose it methodology which was set up at the time of basically if you don't use the annual allocation of flights, then
and reverts
it goes back to what your actual use was or thereabouts, and that was to prevent sort of horse trading and flight grabbing, if you like. But the whole purpose of the methodology is to have managed sustained growth. It's not to put a cap on it, it's to and certainly the main operator there sought a number of additional flights in accordance with their operation, and that was granted. I do know that the daily caps are
I wonder
challenging.
if it's just clarifying some of the language that we use in the RMP rather than the actual enablers, so that we make it clearer in the language of the RMP what it can enable. If that makes sense. So rather than thinking about it from a point of view of making significant changes, that the way that it's worded is just better for people to understand.
I mean, do the operators now understand the process for going over their daily limit?
I think they all adhere to the daily limit.
Oh, so they don't go over it.
And I do
Well,
think, I know that that is probably, that is the most, aside from the overall limit, not being able to plan for growth.
Yes.
I think the daily limit is the
One
more
of
difficult
those.
one for them to adhere
So they're
to.
hitting that ceiling when.
Yeah, because you might have 2 weeks of
bad
bad weather and then you have a week of great weather.
Yep.
You can't even do your annual allocation because you're limited to the daily limit.
Yeah, we make that less restrictive.
Again, that's not in the reserve management plan, those prescriptive limits. That sits in the flight allocation methodology, which, you know, the policy is agree and maintain a flight allocation methodology in partnership with the Glenorchy Airstrip Consultative Governance Committee, which, you know, more operators can engage with, to determine the annual allocation of commercial flights. It considers and gives weight to whether operations are actively seeking to reduce noise for investment, technology and operation innovation, how operators are seeking to actively reduce or offset carbon emissions from their activity, whether operators can demonstrate direct employment benefits to the Glenorchy community, whether operators can demonstrate direct benefit to farming, emergency or conservation activities. Good for the filming and streaming as well. There's nothing in the reserve management plan. There is the use it or lose it methodology. But there is nothing in here that determines whether or not there's a daily or a monthly limit. Not in the reserve management plan, that's possibly in the noise management plan. But I think that can be subject to change and review as well.
Okay. We get to meet them.
So can we clarify what we want to kind of look at amending in the actual plan, so that we can, so just from my understanding then, we're not achieving this today. We're looking at officers going back and making amendments to the RMP, then bringing it back to full council, or to, sorry, the Community Services Committee.
Yeah, so you, as a hearings panel, will need to agree the final form.
Yeah.
And
But we're not going to achieve all of the amendments that are likely to happen.
Not to the exact wordsmithing, but I think we can agree the
Intent.
key changes resulting from the submission.
Yes.
and you could make it subject to, you know, determining outside the hearing, what those changes are. Provided that we kept a, like a paper trail of where anything happened, but,
So could it be that the track
Or-
changes come back to the panel?
yeah, or you could reconvene.
Well, I would recommend the track changes come back to the panel,
Yeah.
and then it goes through to the
Or
community
review.
services.
But I guess what I'm struggling with is clarity on exactly what we're
Well, that's, you
asking
can do
from,
that now.
from officers to change, and
Does it help if I say what I'm hearing, both from
yeah,
the
sure,
submitters
yes,
and
please.
yourselves? But I think some more direction in the management plan around what public amenities and waiting rooms, etc., would look like. But that, you know, also clarification that QLDC is a requiring authority. Expects that would be delivered by others
Yeah.
under a lease arrangement. probably with one of the major operators putting in a hangar.
Right, so let's move on to that, but just to clarify what we've been talking about for the
Oh,
last
sorry, I was
half hour
going
or so,
through my list here.
which is the designation, and we sort of have to park that because we don't have any control over the designation. It's just the RMP we're looking at today, of course, and we've been talking about time limits and landings and all those sorts of things, which we don't necessarily have control over in the RMP.
There is possibly one way to do it, is we do have thresholds in the reserve management plan around reviewing the flight allocation methodology. There are thresholds in the designation conditions around when you undertake noise monitoring.
Okay,
There could be a threshold in the reserve management plan at which point, say when 80% of all flights are utilised or allocated, and for that coming year, council then determines whether or not a review of the reserve management plan is required.
yeah,
So you're not saying we'll do a review, but there's a threshold in there, which I think will be, it'll be inevitable. Anyway,
Sounds
speaking off the record,
potentially.
you could have a threshold policy in the plan that acknowledges that eventually that limit is, we're going to get closer and closer to that limit, and it's not so much about noise monitoring. That council would visit the need for a review.
Mhm.
Because obviously we can't commit in the management plan to do the review. That's a whole other council process that is a, public process. Council notifies its intent.
But we can signal a trigger point with that review.
Yeah, that can, yeah, and we could do the wording around that sort of. Just acknowledge that this isn't fixed. It does need to be.
There'll be a little
It doesn't, yeah, well, it does need to be agile, but it does also need to be pragmatic, in that we can't write a management plan that was signaling growth when we know that we physically can't implement that, because we have to do another process which we don't have control of the outcome of. This would be a way to acknowledge that we can't just put this on the shelf and let it gather dust.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go with that. Maybe
Plus
if we
some
can-
additional, revision of the wording to just make sure that it is, it does look beyond when that limit is reached without suggesting growth beyond that when we aren't able to implement that.
Okay, well, maybe come back to us with the changes and give us some wording around there as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We want to talk about infrastructure.
Yeah, so
Well,
what
what's-
facilities and amenities on site, I mean?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hangers, toilets.
Yeah, so could we kind of insert some direction that speaks to the improvement of the runway surface without directing it? Because obviously that's going to require which we spoke about before, which is capital investment through QLDC, but you mentioned that there's already some talk about that. So is there a way that the RMP can signal intent without mandating it?
Well, yeah, I guess acknowledge that there will need to be some improvements made.
Yeah, I think acknowledge QAC's recommendations in line with the certification, CAA certification. I think that,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
With regard to development in terms of hangar and toilet facilities, can that be signalled in such a way that we prepare to provide a ground lease for operators to provide such facilities?
So it does, the plan does do that, and I take the point of a couple of the submitters, it does, it's quite explicit here that it is consider up to a maximum of 2 hangars. For overnight storage of aircraft. That was directed, well, the community input when we said, you know, how many hangars, 0, 2, 5, unlimited. That was informed by the feedback on those questions back at the early engagement stage. But you know, consider up to a maximum of 2 hangars.
We need to clarify that QLDC wouldn't provide those, it would be operator initiatives that would do that.
That wording could be, yes, amended to say the delivered.
Could we say something along the lines of supporting, that we can support future provision for hangars? And
Support
minimal
them in
amenities, through the relevant and appropriate processes. Because, sorry, I'm still not clear on, I believe there's been done some work looking at the actual safer layout for that.
The layout work that was done, yeah, looked at where the most pragmatic location for hangars would be, and then in response to the potential wastewater treatment service, the disposal field, which would take up a lot of the reserve, the area, there was an area set aside for potentially up to 5 hangars to preserve the purpose of the airstrip, I guess.
Right, yeah.
Acknowledging that airstrips are in finite supply. So that, you know, the tension between free waters infrastructure versus sustaining the airstrip for the future generations. You know, the objective, the reserve is managed and developed in a manner that maintains its purpose as an airstrip for local and community aviation. And then to ensure any future development is sensitive to and compatible with the surrounding environment, because that was a big theme as well, you know, protecting a gateway to Glenorchy and obviously those that overlook the airstrip. I think that those policies consider up to a maximum of 2 hangars for overnight storage of aircraft. That could be made clearer that QLDC doesn't intend to deliver that.
No.
But allow for public toilets and a waiting area. Again, that could be sort of made clearer what the intent of that would be without being too prescriptive, so that if an operator does come to deliver a hangar and then incorporates toilets in a waiting area, then that is potentially available for all operators, not just, we're not getting individual waiting areas for individual companies. But we don't want to catch ourselves. What my advice would be, the previous plan said, you know, combine all of the infrastructure and encourage all the operators to share. Well, how do you do that in practice?
Okay. So have we landed on a direction there in terms of supporting future provision of hangars without mandating or explicitly stating it?
How supportive is the current wording?
I think it does enable it. We have been working with an operator on a hangar, you know, awaiting plans, and you know, once the advice has been, once the plan is adopted, depending on the outcome of the hearing, then it should enable a hangar, provided it meets the other policies, and then obviously landowner approval required.
Yes.
But
okay, so generally speaking, it's supportive of infrastructure being built. Appropriately. So we need to make sure that criteria is well drafted, and then also around the financing of that infrastructure as well.
yeah, I think that we could allude to that, but I don't think we need to
Doesn't
be
need to be in the area.
that explicit, because you know, it's in line with many of our other management plans. We say consider, provide,
Good.
support,
Yeah, good point.
doesn't
Doesn't necessarily say who's paying for it,
yeah.
or even that process is saying.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm happy with that. But touching on the runway piece, because we sort of touched on that and then sort of moved on. Do we need to say something about supportive generally of the upgrade of the runway pending budget approval or anything like that? Since have we actually indicated that we're supportive of the upgrade of the runway?
Not specifically, no.
Is that something we need to do?
But I don't know if it's appropriate, like in the management plan as such, but
I do wonder if in development and infrastructure, like there is nothing near sort of what QLDC is doing, is to sort of that maybe acknowledge the
It's the
surface
intention.
of the airstrip.
Mm,
Et cetera, et cetera.
mm.
So
Yeah,
it's
maybe
the
just strengthen it
surface of
slightly.
the airstrip is. We don't want to signal that it's going to be sealed and turned into
No, no.
something more than what it is, but you know, still in accordance with this certification as a grass airstrip, acknowledge that some improvements may need to be made for
Required.
safety.
Yeah.
Operational purposes,
Yes,
could be along those lines.
it probably makes a lot more sense. Okay. That changes as well.
so. Do we need to say? No, that's okay.
We don't acknowledge it, and I think it would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
We currently say, what do we currently say, manage the reserve, so the airstrip is safe to use in accordance with CAA regulation.
yeah, which is, that's what, that's the all encompassing.
Yeah.
One that would enable that.
Right, what's the next topic you wanna tackle?
Microlights.
Yeah, that was my next one. I agree on that.
Can you tell us the number in that?
So the noise management plan has wording in there around what were you saying before, the high volume, high annoyance activity or something, and it may also specify microlights.
Mm,
I think that was a hangover from
Yeah.
the Skytrek days, which probably was an older version. It's an option to remove that prohibition.
The
In response.
issue, one of the submitters certainly spoke to it was that the nature of microlights has changed, and now we see some aircraft that look like a normal aircraft, but they're still specified as a microlight.
Yeah.
Can we put an exception for recreational users versus commercial?
Yes.
Given that the impact back in the day of the commercial user and the irritation that created was what drove this specifically. Recreational users are probably much smaller. We know it's 5% of the total usage of the airstrip of recreational, and then of that, how many is microlight?
Well, it says the policy 8.2.6 on page 33. It states prohibit intensive high annoyance noisy activities such as microlights. We could just delete such as microlights, and that would cover that.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I'm saying,
And it doesn't reference microlights anywhere else, I guess if it does, we just.
Well, we can change, we'll review that noise management plan after, but yeah, plans adopted anyway. Okay,
yeah,
that's the changes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there was the submissions around the civil defence and emergency response. Whether or not you follow the policies are sufficient already
it's adequate.
and support.
Mm.
Is it recognised as a core purpose of the reserve or not?
Yes. Fees, particularly for recreational users.
So, remind me, the fee structure for a recreational user is cheaper than a commercial user?
No, it's, well, the policies and the plan are set fees in accordance with market rates, pretty much. And those fees haven't been reviewed since probably 8 years ago when they were first established, which was done at the time of similar size airstrips in the area, and the recommendation was a flat rate for all users, heli, fixed wing, and recreational. There is a policy around fees, so set lease rates largely in accordance with the market rate of comparable aerodromes and taking into account the unique location and demand in Glenorchy and QLDC revenue and finance policy.
Have we got any officers in the room? Officers in the room that expect someone? How do we set them in? They're not jumping up quickly, are they? Jenny, you're in.
I mean, it hasn't been done since it was established, so.
No experts in the room?
but
I'm
the-
looking at the.
So the landing, so that was a leasing one, and then funding and user charges. Except the objective, except where contrary to QLDC's revenue and financing policy. The cost to manage and maintain an airstrip is subsidised by landing fees and any other income that can be generated from the airstrip. So ensure landing fees are paid, require all operators to pay landing fees, set landing fees taking into account market rates, the grass airstrip in limited facilities, unique location, the sensitivity of the receiving environment, review landing fees regularly. Consider using landing fees as a means to incentivize or discourage activities that do not meet the objectives of this plan. So I think there's probably quite a lot of scope within that to undertake a review and.
I think we tested this with the market. Never goes down usually, does it?
Well, interesting, we've got a flat rate at the moment, and maybe it should be considered to look at differential use. There's also the opposing views of like cost recovery for the district, versus, you know, recreational users saying it's too expensive.
Just to be clear then, the cost to run the airstrip versus what our cost recovery is, what's the difference?
Get less than 50% of what it costs to
So it's,
run it, and that's without additional capital projects such as resurfacing the runway.
so in order to break even, we would have to double the fees. In theory.
Is the cost of collecting the fees under the present system possibly able to be offset by particular commercial users having to pay a fixed annual fee rather than individual movement fees?
Yeah, so how that has been set up, both to reduce the administrative burden, but also, all commercial operators, with the exception of Glenorchy, pay upfront. So at the start of the year, it's like, right, we're going to do 100 flights, so they pay $1,800 at the start of the year, and if they only do 90 flights, they don't get a refund of 10 flights. Glenorchy, because they are so much beyond the number of flights and the cost. I think it's charged upfront, but it's paid off monthly, and that's been quite a process to get underway over a few years, if it's not without its hiccups. So that's how it is currently set up, but that's not to say that can't be reviewed and changed, and that doesn't need to be set out in the management plan. It's not currently set out in the management plan.
Sorry, Esther, I cut you off before. I just wanted a clarification question.
No, that's right.
That was sorry, I'll just cut you off as well. We did ask that in the early feedback.
Yeah.
Who should pay? Should recreational users pay more? Should commercial users pay more, etc.
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, people didn't want to pay more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, could we anchor some wording in the RMP that's, leaves us a kind of principled position around differentiating costs for fair recovery for recreational users and, market rate for commercial users, and have a kind of principle wording in the RMP rather than any explicit kind of fee structure that just signals opportunity for differential costings if I don't know.
I mean, we do signal it for, well, the question we asked back in April was, should a new charging regime promote operators who can demonstrate they are reducing carbon emissions? And address climate change concerns. You know, Glenorchy community predominantly said yes, aviation community predominantly said no.
That's a challenging question.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
a very
yeah,
challenging
it is.
question.
And from an aviation point of view, you're hamstrung by technology, and aviation is probably the hardest one to change, I would say. I can see struggling with it the last 5-10 years, trying to innovate more efficient fuels. So it's a hard one to put on aviation sector.
I mean, it could be that you add another factor to consider when setting fees. I mean, as soon as you consult, everybody's going to have an opinion on, you know, or give feedback on
Yeah.
who should pay. So
So the current wording.
current wording,
Yeah.
set landing fees taking into account market rates, grassy strip and limited facilities, unique location, sensitivity of the receiving environment. Consider using landing fees as a means to incentivize or discourage activities do not meet the objectives of this plan. The objectives of the plan is to provide for aviation and sustainable, you know, aviation that's purpose, but also to provide for recreation. But are you more explicit in you could you also argue helicopters have less impact on the airstrip than fixed wing? You know, which way do you differentiate it?
And I don't have the experts on that.
Could we just add something that around recovering fair and reasonable costs or something like that, so that there's a recognition and acknowledgement that we're currently, you know, only recovering less than 50% of the costs, but that part of it, the intent is to recover.
So the objective is, I mean, it's said in the description, in 2024, the landing fees and user charges met less than 50% of the cost of maintaining the airstrip, including engaging an aerodrome operator. Objectives, except where contrary to our policy, the cost to manage and maintain the airstrip is subsidised by landing fees and any other income that can be generated from the airstrip. You could say, recover as much as possible. There's always that tension though between setting market rates for a undeveloped grass airstrip and charging higher rates that are more in line with a more developed airstrip.
Yeah, no, I
Fair
think
and reasonable covers that.
So where would you say?
I don't know if it's
So
helpful.
the cost to manage. Well, you could say policies, ensure landing fees are fair and reasonable, but what does that mean?
It's not helpful.
Fair,
It's okay.
fair to the ratepayer or fair to the?
because it adds a service to the
Well, I mean,
community,
fair
right,
and
as
reasonable
well.
in recovery of costs is kind of where I was coming from, because it's about recovery of costs, which means it's just a slightly different way of phrasing it. That means that it's.
Okay, we can have a look at seeing how that can be reflected.
But I'm not saying that actually recovering half is not a bad thing either.
No, it's just about, I think it's about acknowledging it for people to understand as well where.
Yeah.
Costs
And I don't know whether the intention of the RMP is to recover the full cost, given that we're only recovering half. Because it is going to be a rural community, we're not probably going to spend much on the infrastructure of the development of it.
I think the main, that, 2024 landing fees and user charges met less than 50%. That doesn't take into account the establishment costs of the infrastructure that council has put in there in previous years.
That's just operational cost.
So yeah, that is the current operational cost.
So could we agree then that in terms of the recommendations to staff, have we kind of traversed everything so far? So we've got emergency use, operating hours, I don't know if we've fully clarified that, noise, surface, utilities, we've covered.
Surfaces, but the other ones are quite general in terms of what the panel has suggested, that I feel like there's no specific wording changes or anything noted, but
Yeah.
we would be coming back to you with
And name,
amendments to consider.
So, yeah, I think that's the point, right, is we kind of need to land on something, like
Yeah.
we're here all day. So,
I think guidance for whether hangers could go.
yeah,
Can be, meet the fuel storage policy removal. So just going back to the funding and user charges, just
Okay.
quickly, is it, identifying in light of the submission from all the community and in terms of emergency use, that I guess there is a point that was made that operation of the airstrip might not ever be covered by the users. Preservation of the airstrip is a critical part of the civil defence response.
Yep.
But users should pay a fair and reasonable cost.
that's the intent, right?
It's the nature of the aerodrome that it'd be impossible to have it as a fully commercially viable thing. There's a community element in there as well. It has to be.
But recognition that council might always be subsidising to an extent.
Yeah.
Primarily for the civil defence.
It's not too far removed from the wording you've got anyway, is it?
No, yeah, no, if there were any sort of more specific, it 9.2, if there was any more specific.
Tell us that one, I guess.
So that's the one that Jeannie's been reading. So the objective is 9.1.1. And then the policies in 9.2, which is on page 36. And we do have a direction to consider how to make it more fair and reasonable. Some specific wording from the panel would be more helpful. Yeah.
Or then, yes.
Yes.
From
for
the-
from the
Yeah.
panel, yeah.
You landing fees regularly. We can determine what regularly means.
Well, probably not once every 8 years.
Because I think the process is there to review it.
Probably you
It's
could
just
have
we
review landing fees following the adoption of this plan.
Well, yeah, I think from this panel's perspective, I think.
Annual review linked to the CPI. Make it simple.
That might not
Well,
be
And
the-
no big complaint. If you lump a big one on,
It's
something like that.
Like,
yeah.
who would be responsible for that?
How do you manage others?
I was about to say, so I know with the other people we manage, landing fees are annual. We get a market report done by an external party that looks at all landing fees around the country. We do a sort of an analysis on that. So I know with other fees and charges, it may go up CPI, but you'll see this round, Glenorchy Airport, for example, was slightly higher than that. So that obviously through the public consultation.
Yeah, well, I'm saying that this
That is
is a
slightly
much
different.
different scenario. to
Yeah.
Glenorchy Airport.
Hmm.
So annually might be a bit of an overcook.
Well, yeah, but little and often is more palatable, I think, than a large.
We can put
I mean,
at a minimum 5 years, you know, you can put a minimum,
I was thinking 3 or 5 years, be my take on it.
yeah.
That's where we ran into trouble with the fees and charges. They
Yeah, they were 13 years.
So,
So, you know, if you give it to like what a typical landlord potentially would review rent, it should be 3 to 5 years. That might be.
Is that enough direction?
Yeah, that's really helpful, yeah, just to get a bit of a steer on that, thank you.
If what you wish for.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to make it 5? Well, I think 5 years is fine from my perspective, but when you guys,
I do wonder if,
this is reviewing the fees.
following the adoption of the plan,
Oh,
and
oh,
then
yes.
again,
Yeah, it's 5 years after that.
Yeah,
Yes, that's
yeah,
fine.
just so it's
Yeah.
up to date now and then reviewed and within 5 years.
and bearing in mind that it does say that it is in accordance with the Consultative Governance Committee, which is
Yes.
supposed to give that over community oversight, including operator oversight. So fuel storage.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Limit the fuel, 7.2.6, page 32. Okay. Limit the storage of fuel at the airstrip and require that this is only done with prior agreement from QLDC and remains the responsibility of the operator.
We just make it more generic, so we put something like. Provision for fuel storage shall be considered where it supports. Safe. Safe and efficient aviation use. And is financially self-sustaining or something like that.
I think exploring, I think that potentially leaving it so that it is enabling, not enabling, but it doesn't
Provision
it
for
doesn't
it.
prevent.
Yeah.
But I think understanding what fuel storage at the airstrip, the implications of that would be is really important.
Yeah.
For example, it might reduce flights for, because operators aren't needing to fly away to fuel up. But would it also increase use at the airstrip because people flying from Milford, Queenstown might go off and fuel up? Theoretically, I don't know. Those are the considerations that we would need to have with regards
So
to
could
a
it be
change in
linked,
fuel storage.
could it be linked to all of the other policies that are already there that speak to the caps that we have? So that the provision is there, but it's in line with the NDP. The noise. Development Fund.
I see that adequate fuel storage is important, particularly in the event, you know, in
Civil defence.
the major civil defence event.
Firefighting and
I think it's important to have adequate supplies of fuel here. And you know, if in the major seismic event and the road got knocked out for months, having adequate resources on hand here is very important.
okay, I wonder, yeah, we can
So could we
reword that one.
say something about user pays as well? Because that was partially an issue as well, where it's.
Well, it is user pays at the moment. It does
Yeah.
say that,
But I mean, if we're saying that there's a greater, if we enable any greater provision for it, then it may be important to be saying subject to.
so how Glenorchy's wording is enable storage of fuel at the airstrip, subject to prior agreement from QLDC and recognising that it remains the responsibility of the operator.
So just remove limit and enable the storage.
Yeah, but.
I think, well, that read in, conjunction with purpose of the airstrip.
Who sets the limit? the legal limit on what sort of fuel you, or level of
Would
fuel?
be dangerous.
Presumably it's done in accordance with the CAA, and I think it's covered off under the concessions that. I don't know if the concessions explicitly provide for that fuel storage though, and I think that's kind of part of the point, is it needs to be managed. And the responsibility of the operator. Maybe one bigger storage thing is better than 3 or 4 tankers dotted around. Again, this is out of my.
Could we, rather than say enable, could we say provision for fuel storage shall be considered by QLDC? Where it supports. What we're looking for, where it supports.
So not quite limit, but not quite enable, or something in between.
So we put much instead of limit or enable? Because ultimately, we don't necessarily know how much you can store there, and
That was the intent of the policy, is that it was to not be silent on it, acknowledge that it occurs there, and that it should be done in a safe.
Yeah.
Manner, but that it also needs to have an element of landowner approval, I guess. It wasn't intended to be limiting, it was more around understanding and being assured probably with what's happening
I
there.
think the important bit is what we've already got in there, and it's also been put through from which
Yeah,
is
what-
prior
I don't mind
agreement
the wording.
from QLDC. So, you know, that is maintained prior agreement from QLDC, so any changes have got our prior agreement, so. Then it's-
There's possibly some dangerous goods. With the regulations too.
I don't mind their wording, either.
can you
But
read the wording?
it's enable storage of fuel at the airstrip subject to prior agreement from QLDC and recognising that it remains responsibility of the operator.
Happy with that?
Okay, so.
So-
Yep.
And then, you know, the overriding purpose and objectives of the airstrip is that it's, you know, local communities, small scale for primarily the.
And we know that in emergencies, they're gonna have to bring significantly more fuel up here. You know, bushfire or whatever it is.
Okay.
Yeah, I've just said it as per, on,
Yeah,
so it's on page 18 of the document.
so is there anything
Oh,
else
the
that
the
you're,
GCA's wording. The Glenorchy Community Association's proposed wording around it, updating the context and description around the Blanket Bay Peninsula and recognising that the.
The need to, the future development should, the whole nature of the community change with the, you know, the, with the Alpine fault.
I'm happy with the wording they provided, but happy to seek any officers' views of that wording in terms of. If you don't feel that any of it's appropriate for any reason. I mean, to me, they're just trying to seek acknowledgement that that work's being done by the Community Association and ORC, and they want that acknowledged in the document. And recognised.
It's not suggested to be included in the policy wording either, so it is, yeah, more of a
Yes, in the
recognition,
context,
as you said,
it's true,
in
yeah.
context, yeah.
I think we could maybe simplify the second paragraph of it to make it perhaps a little more valuable.
Did you have any
Want me to read it out?
separate suggestions?
So hang on, simplify.
Did GCA did they suggest some,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some wording, the reserve description. There it is.
in their submission?
So the reserve description is quite straightforward. The community have identified this parcel as being the preferred location for relocating or rebuilding the settlement if required after an Alpine fault event. That's just stating what the community have identified. It's not stating what council's intention is for that land or the reserve revocation or anything like that. That we can do.
So we can acknowledge what the community association has,
Well, we could, yeah, and do it in a way that is,
doesn't give any.
yeah, that's what the community.
It's an acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
So it would sit in the historical context part.
Yeah. And then 3.6 history section.
Yeah.
Whether or not we need this, but an outcome from the head of the lake adaptation work stream led by ORC was the realization that much of the current Glenorchy settlement may be uninhabitable following the Alpine fault rupture. Community have identified 50 hectare Blanket Bay Recreation Reserve adjacent to the airstrip as a preferred location in the event that the settlement has to be relocated and rebuilt. Future growth and development of the airstrip should not compromise this possibility. I think that second paragraph has got some broader assumptions in it. And it's not really relevant to history. In the sense that it's not historic, it's more sort of future.
Focused, yeah.
And to state future growth and development of the airstrip should not compromise this possibility is quite strong.
It has
Dominating.
some implications, doesn't it?
So under the reserve description that they've wanted changing above, the community have identified the parcel as being a preferred location for relocating or rebuilding the settlement if required after an Alpine fault event. Could we not just as part of that, noting the work led by ORC in 2023 to 2025? So that it incorporates their view of the work that's being done. And then it's referenced for people to go to, but without it, so it acknowledges it, but without it having any kind of strong implications.
Yeah, I think we can make some wording. I'd be a bit reluctant to specifically reference that because an updated version in 2 years might make it out of date.
Yeah.
But I think we can have an acknowledgement. Because future growth and development of the airstrip should not compromise this possibility it's sort of is the opposite of what the purpose of the airstrip is.
Yeah.
Not massively, but it is
Yeah.
I think all of that would be in the event that this happened. It would be probably the airstrip would be being used in a very, very different way, and
Aspect of that.
things would be revisited in general.
Yeah. So could we just today signal that you will review that wording?
Yeah.
And possibly even speak back to the community association.
I think it's really important to acknowledge around the Alpine fault and the adaptation of the township, etc.
Yeah. But just
so,
getting it right for the RMP.
Noting that Blanket Bay recreation land is out of scope of this reserve management plan.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But it's just acknowledging that in the event of an Alpine fault rupture,
That
the airstrip might not be on the outskirts, it might be in the middle of town.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what have we agreed on?
So
We will take that into account and
I'm sorry. So are there any other things that we have to clarify the direction?
Yeah.
As part of the final report, I will do a officer commentary.
Okay.
On each of the submissions and what was changed and what wasn't, and everything up.
For any feedback.
From us.
Yeah, just the final tech changes and that, just that final wordsmithing.
So in all truth, you are not in a position at this point to have a resolution to recommend the final form of.
No.
No.
We can amend that though, we can amend the recommendation, we can amend number 3.
Yeah.
To say.
Okay, yeah, it would be good to have some sort of resolution that concludes what has happened today.
What the wording from.
So,
yeah.
We could have recommend to the Community and Services Committee following the hearing and amendment, and amendments from officers back to the hearing panel. Or maybe we need to do it in 2 sentences.
Yeah, because does it specify whether or not
Yeah.
it would come
How
to
would
the
it-
deliberations or be
Yeah.
recorded?
3A and 3B maybe.
So, we could do, 2A, we could, following, amendments from staff.
Like if you.
Yeah,
reconvene
following the provision of,
Agree the final form.
It might be, it takes a little bit longer than half an hour.
I think it'd be fine for you to give us the amendments back to the hearing panel
Yeah.
at a later date.
Yeah,
It's just the track, it's just the track changes that
changes.
reflects what we've
Yeah.
discussed today.
Exactly.
I don't think that we'll be making any additional changes beyond what we've discussed today. It's just
No.
how
No
they
major
are
ones.
incorporated.
So just need a resolution that
just
speaks to that.
previously we have done it without amending the resolution,
I thought we did.
amend the.
I thought we
Queenstown
amended
Hill
like
work.
the third one there just to say.
Yeah.
After track changes or. Final.
Following the hearing.
following the receipt of the final amendments from officers which reflect the discussions,
Following the hearing.
the deliberation discussions. Okay, so this. So agree to recommend to Community Services Committee. We want to make it subject.
Yeah,
Subject to receipt of the final amendments from officers which reflect the deliberation discussions of the final form of the draft Airstrip Reserve Management Plan to be adopted.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I'm saying, yeah, the what's being deliberated today is the key changes. Us incorporating that into the actual plan and you guys seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm
No big changes.
No, would it be helpful if I
Absolutely.
listed the changes that I've recorded as action points, or are you guys clear on what those?
No, you can quickly run through them if you want.
Is that helpful, Jenny?
Oh, well, I think the only problem with that is. Do we need to do that?
That's okay.
subject
Just summarise what we've
to,
already discussed. in the
Yeah.
deliberation.
Yeah, it's
If you've got
very,
them in bullet point to say these are the.
yeah, just.
I mean, we haven't actually just taken out one, we haven't really clarified the name.
Oh, the air drive.
Yeah.
agreeing.
So I guess I'm just wondering that if we then state it and
boxes.
miss
Okay.
anything,
I
so
think,
is it better to not do that and to just say deliberations?
Should we close the deliberations and then?
Yeah.
Do you want to read it out? No.
to be adopted with changes. So, yes, so this is new, subject to the hearing panel receiving and agreeing the final amendments from officers which reflect the deliberation discussions.
Change agreement to agreeing.
Yeah,
So shall I read it out or?
uh. the- adopted, comma there. Subject to the hearing panel receiving and agreeing the final amendments from officers which reflect the deliberation discussion.
Okay,
I know it's
it's
long,
wordy.
yeah.
It doesn't really matter,
Yeah,
does it?
Yeah, exactly. That's
Mm.
Covers what we need it to do. So let me read it out in its full form. At the hearing panel, note the contents of this report. 2, receive all submissions to the draft Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve Management Plan 2025.
25.
Here's the submitters who wish to be heard, and 3, recommend to Community and Services Committee the final form of the draft Glenorchy Airstrip Reserve Management Plan 2025 to be adopted with changes as an outcome of the consultation process, subject to the hearing panel receiving and agreeing the final amendments from officers which reflect the deliberation discussions.
Well, it's correct. And it covers what we
What you want?
intend, and it incorporates the deliberation process. So I think it's good. It's just
Okay.
very long, but that's fine.
So do we move that now?
I've
or-
seen longer ones.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, it would be good to have a mover and a seconder so that
Yeah.
everything that happens subsequently can occur outside
Yep.
this group gathering
Yes.
together.
Okay, so we've got that in front of us. I'm not reading it again. Do we have a mover?
I'm happy to move.
Seconded by Esther. Right, deliberations concluded,
So motion carried?
motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Steph.
1:15. Or 1:14 in fact.